Hello and welcome to the June episode of the Organic Gardening Podcast. I'm Fiona Taylor from Garden Organic. Now, before we launch into our discussion on what's on the cards in our gardens and allotments in June, I wanted to just remind you that we've slightly updated the format of this podcast, releasing our interviews separately later on in the month. If you've not yet listened to my chat with Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, I'd thoroughly recommend it. His warmth and passion for organic growing is perfect listening for a stint whilst you're working in the veg patch. And later this month, you can hear my conversation with Professor Dave Goulson, one of the world's leading experts on insect conservation. Dave shares his fascinating insight into what he describes as our toxic food system and the role growing your own food can play. To make sure you don't miss an episode, why not subscribe to our podcast? And if you have 2 minutes to like and review the show, that would be brilliant, as it really does help to make sure as many people as possible know all about us. Now, without further ado, I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Collins.
Hi, Fiona.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So this is a very, very busy time of year for you. You're looking like you have been outside an awful lot in the last few weeks.
I have indeed. I've been enjoying the sun, although it's obviously given me a set of problems I have to deal with because it's been so dry. I don't know, it's been the rest of the country, but the southeast London incredibly dry. But that's all right. I don't mind. I'll get out. I'm up at the crack of dawn. I'm down the allotment at 5:30 in the morning. I think I was down there last week, watering stuff. But yeah, it's been challenging.
Not just hot and dry, but I mean,
cold as well.
Very cold.
Well, May certainly was the coldest May I've had in years. In London, we had a frost on May the 9th. We had a frost. And
okay.
I was quite shocked. Again, I got up very early to go to the allotment. It was actually a silver frost.
Wow.
And it's quite that rule of, I've always said, haven't I, make sure you put your tenders out late in May. And usually I cite cold easterly winds, but this was a frost, but it just shows you how important that rule is, really.
Okay,
and,
so did you lose anything?
I didn't know. I did get some silvering on the potatoes. So one of the signs of cold air is you'd see when you look at your plant is you'll get like a silver sort of flush to the leaf. And so that happened to my potatoes. I'm not particularly worried about potatoes. They're hard as nails. They'll get going again. But a bit, if we done, my neighbour had run her beans out. They were gone.
They've all gone.
They'd had it. Yeah, they weren't really. You
Yeah.
can sow them again. It's not a problem. But it just shows again that people, I know we get overexcited and we want to go early,
Yes.
but it's really worth doing. I think the other thing to say is that I tend to listen, the temperature of the soil is very important, and that tends to be dictated by the night air temperature. And the nights have been cold. We've had easterly winds.
Yes.
Even on the balcony's been very cold. So I've kind of held back. A combination of the dry and the cold, I've really waited this year. And what tends to happen is when the heat wave at the end of May, beginning of June, the soil then warms up. When I put the plants in, they soon catch up.
Right.
You know, and that's quite an important rule to remember. You're not behind because the plants will accelerate when they get that roots into the warm soil.
Okay, and I've held a few things back actually because it's been so cold. I've got a tray of chard and a tray of spinach, which I think are both pretty hardy usually, but I just wanted to check, am I all right to get those out now?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you mentioned those plants actually because the heat is probably more likely to cause a problem because they kind of bolt. And I've noticed this year a lot that I've got a lot of salad crops in a polytunnel. It's very successful, but some of them are really trying to bolt. So the warmth is encouraging them to set seed. So things like Mazuma and stuff, which is more unusual types, I've grown a lot of that, and they're not so prone to it, which is quite interesting. But it's salads are one of my favourite things to grow, but I have to keep an eye on that bolting because you can put them in, and first thing they want to do is flower.
Yeah.
I've really hit a lot of microgreens this year. I literally got old baking crates. I found a load of those and I lined them with Hessian, put the soil in, and I've been sowing them really thick with like leafy kale leaves,
Lovely.
basil, microgreen basil,
Yeah.
Mazumas, and I've been growing loads of that, and they are absolutely delicious. And it's kind of got me round the bolting problem,
Right.
because I'm grazing them quite quickly.
Yeah.
That's kind of really worked. So yeah, just keep an eye on them. The way around it, if you start to see bolting, is just to pinch them out, deadhead them, then you'll get more out of it, definitely.
So my Italian parsley in the greenhouse that's been there for well over a year, it's just been fantastic actually. I mean, I've just cropped so much from it. It is now coming up to flower and seed, which is a beautiful process. And I'm really enjoying watching that. And I quite like to save some of that seed because it's just been wonderful. I want to sow it again. But my question is, I've got quite a lot of whitefly on it. Have you got any pests in your polytunnel?
The only pests I've had is whitefly as well. I've not had any problem with aphids yet this year. I've seen one slug, and that slug was 4 stories up. on my patio window door, going for my bird food.
Oh, right.
And I kind of looked at it for him, going, fill your boots, mate. You're going to come make that much effort. But yeah, a little bit whitefly. Oh, it doesn't bother me when it gets a big infestation, it's a problem because you get the scale and etc. But a few whitefly, I crop them and I just wash them off. It's not. It's not. I'd rather have that than a chemical on them. That's for sure.
Well, also they're not kind of sticky, are they? In the same way that the other kind of aphids are. They're sort of they're more fluttery. You kind of shake them off.
Yeah. You get if you get a big infestation, it's a problem. But just a few of them isn't really a problem. So it's been, I think, because of the cold and the dry, it's not been a big year for pests yet.
Yeah.
You know, we've had a hot start to the month, or the end of the May, hot start there. I think you can probably start to see aphid infestations coming in pretty soon.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, May just was incredibly variable. You know,
it was almost like April. It's like it was back to front. You know, I was getting hailstone a few weeks ago, and it was almost back to front. And I was hardening stuff off and on the balcony, from the front room onto the balcony, and we had a massive hailstorm. So I got plants damaged, and I just didn't see that coming. And so it scared me coming back to that. You have to be a bit of a weatherman scenario, but I think that's everything will catch up. Like I say, it always does. Yeah.
I was trying to harden off my brassicas I've got a very simple kind of cheap and cheerful little cold frame.
Yeah.
And I was hardening off my cima da rapa, you know, the lovely Italian kind of broccoli. And also I've got a tray of cauliflowers that I raised from seed. So I'm really excited about that. Put them into the cold frame because I thought actually it's going to get too hot for them in the greenhouse. And the slugs have really had a go. I've managed to salvage them, and I've just brought them back into the greenhouse again because that does seem to be slug free at the moment.
Yeah.
But my question really around this is, you know, people often say, like, get the plant going, make sure it's reasonably mature before you put it out, because that will mean it can withstand a bit of slug damage. But how mature? You know, I've got my little tray of spinach, and I don't want that to all go overnight.
I have a rule. What happens? The reason they don't like so much the more mature plant is, as the plant matures, you get lignin coming into the cells, and they like that very soft, tender leaf. That's why they're more attracted to it. So you get a tougher leaf as the plant matures. But I think I have a 6-leaf, 8-leaf rule basically. So if they get to that size, I will take a risk and put them out.
Right.
In something like a cold frame, I would just be out with the tongs in the morning.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Yeah. But you're right to mention it. You want the plant to be a bit bigger, and then they're just not so attractive, basically.
Right. Okay.
The taste is not as good for them.
Okay.
They're fussy, mate. They are fussy.
Excellent. We need to play to that.
Yeah, we do. I'll tell you what's worked quite well is I had them with the polytunnel, and I was doing decoy salad leaves. So I'd take a bundle of them and I'd dig a little hole in there and in the bed, and I'd put them in, and that was last year. They were hitting that first, yeah. So then there's little methods. I think we've said it 1,000 times. When it comes to slugs and snails, it's a combination of efforts, really. That controls them. I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
It's this year because I'm going to be very specific in my growing on the allotment this year. Obviously, I run a kitchen garden. I grow as much variation as I can there. But this one, my allotment, I'm going to go for really Mediterranean. I eat a lot of tomatoes. I eat a lot of aubergines. I eat a lot of peppers. I eat a lot of squash. I eat a lot of pumpkins. So I'm going to fill it with those plants this year because they're the things I can make sauces out of, put in the freezer. So normally I vary it up, and the stuff I'm not so keen on, I'm going to very grow the stuff I love to eat this year, and I'm going to take the bet that it's going to be a warm summer, because they are now, and I'll have a lot of success with them. So I've really focused in this year.
Okay, well, because it's not too late for anybody if they want to get cracking.
Yeah, so we're still. This is the plant out month. You know, this is it. You know, the only thing you got to remember is I've got to be down there watering them for this first few months to make sure they establish, and then I can sit back. And the balcony is going to be, I think, going to be a cracker this year.
I mean, this time of year, it's not too late to get going with some squashes, get going with some sweet corn, that kind of stuff. As in, you're ahead of all of us, Chris. You know, you've got them all ready to plant out. But actually, there's a few people, myself included, who haven't yet sown courgettes. I haven't yet sown squashes. Am I too late?
You're not too late to sow courgette or squash or pumpkin. So those, because once they're in the ground and the ground's warm, they will motor. They will really go for it. So I recommend you give them a little bit of a start. So maybe you get a root trainer tray. Okay, so trays with very long sort of pots underneath, so you're not going to touch the roots when you move them. Sow them in there. They can't quite quick. They'll get to 4-leaf stage. cotyledon, 2 more leaves, then you can pop them out and plant them, and they'll get into warm soil. They'll sit there for 2 weeks, and they will just motor, particularly things like courgettes. It just wants to fruit. It'll just go for it. Runner beans, sweet corn, so direct. Now, straight in the soil. So your sweet corn in drills, so your runner beans on a wigwam. You can just do that now. The soil will be warm enough, those plants will be up in 10 days, and then off you go again. The big rule of all this is make sure they're kept damp. The warm soil they will establish, and you'll get good crops come mid-July to August into early September.
Sweet corn?
Yes, I said you just sow them in drills straight. I never sow. What I found with things like runner beans and sweet corn is if I grow them in modules or pots, particularly runner beans, they all just get tangled up and they all grow around.
Just put them straight in.
Yeah, just put them straight in. The same sweet corn. Sweet corn will direct sow, no problem at all. Yeah. And they don't like being moved. If you move them,
right,
it'll just checks them. The other thing with sweet corn is June's the perfect month because May would have been too cold. They really, really feel the cold, the sweet corn. They grey up really quick. So June is a brilliant time to do the sweet corn. And again, with watering, maybe a little bit of seaweed extract on a feed, once they've got the roots in the ground, they will really go. Yeah.
My plan is to grow the sweet corn and put the squashes underneath them.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I'm going to put squashes in. I've got a big compost pile at Gorsfield, and I'm going to put a few squashes in there.
Oh, I love that. A pumpkin on top of compost.
Yeah. I'm going to go, and I've got this lovely little sweet pumpkin. My neighbour in Fidmore Hill gave me, and it's delicious. I don't think it's even got a name. They've just been passing the seed down. So, but last year I made some brilliant pasta sauces with it. So that's going to get a go, definitely.
I do need to tell you about a very exciting development in my garden.
Go for it.
I have a fruit cage now.
Oh, very good.
Which was a wonderful birthday present, and it is now full of red currant, black currant, gooseberry, and I've left a space because it backs onto a wall. I've left a space to do a raspberry, but I realise I've left it too late, and I don't think I can get hold of a pot-grown one. They're all sold out at this stage, but that's the plan. In the autumn, I'll put one in and train that up the wall. So yeah, very excited about that. Very excited.
Well, it's good, isn't it? Because if you're buying them from the supermarket, they all going to be well sprayed, probably. Yeah. So if you want organic fruit, soft fruit, it's the way forward. And I'm glad your family are recognising your gardening talents and buying you the right play presents.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been an awful lot of help actually in putting up the frame. In fact, I had very little to do with the putting up of the frame.
It was your birthday.
Well, indeed it was. Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything we should be doing around our compost heap?
Just keep adding to it. I mean, if you're hot composting like I do, add to it and turn it and make sure there's some moisture in it. That's it really. I'm just building them up again, really. I used them all sort of March, April, it all went out and did its job. I've still got a bit stored away, but yeah, I'm just on the march for that basically. Because I'm weeding, I'm taking out the wild plants I don't want, and there's still leaves to clear up, there's still things like that. So there's always cardboard in lose short of that. So yeah, just keep the process going. That should be an ongoing thing. Every time you go to your plot or into your garden, you should be thinking about that. Mm-hmm. That's one of the first things I think about. It's interesting when I'm doing it on the bigger scale. I've got grass clippings and leaves. A lot of grass. I cut a lot of grass, obviously leaves and big trees where I'm working. I put those two together, and I've been keeping the sprinkler on it a little bit for half hour in the morning, giving it a turn, and it's breaking down into beautiful stuff already. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's encouraging. June is famous for the June drop. So talk us through that. What do we need to be thinking about if we've got some fruit trees?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, I might do a bit of thinning on some plants. I don't massively have the time to sit there with a pair of scissors and do it because I've got a lot of fruit trees. More likely to do it with my grapes than anything else.
Okay.
Because grapes definitely benefit from thinning, that's for sure. But if you have the time and you've got, say, a 6 or 7 apples in a bunch, if you can take a few out and allow the rest to mature, that will benefit. Definitely, you'll get a nicer apple. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And generally across the borders, if you've got, your flower borders, what would you be doing this time of year?
Well, I'm certainly making sure that they've grown as quick as they can. So I do a bit of feeding. I do definitely obviously do mulching. As they start, I might support a lot of the herbaceous stuff. I've got quite a big herbaceous collection, dahlias and things like that. So I'm definitely supporting them. My bedding's in as well. I love my bedding. I've been sort of put a lot of that in. But yeah, just general maintenance. Just that in a way, we're coming into that period where you've worked intensely hard seed sowing, which is my favourite thing to do.
Yes.
getting it out, everything's in the ground, and there's quite an intense period of watering, because without that watering, you're not going to get establishment, you'll lose stuff. But I'm now coming into the area where I just deadhead, I weed a little bit. I'm now going to start reaping the rewards of my earlier efforts, and that's kind of where we're heading into as we come to the end of this month.
Yeah. I mean, it is exciting, isn't it? I've already had a little bit of harvest from some of the stuff I've sown this year.
Yeah, you do it when it all got off. I've even got stuff from last year. I've only just finished off my Tommies from last year. I've actually gone full circle almost, which I'm very proud of. And just making them into a sauce, basically, or into a pesto. Like, I've had sun-dried tomatoes, which I liquidized, and it's made this paste, and I've been making flans with that. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's now. So I've come all the way around. So when you crop it, especially something like tomato, when they come, it says to be a heavy bulk crops, and have ideas in your head about how you want to use them, boil them up, make sauces, etc., and freeze them. And you're using them. I've used them all winter, and I love that. I really do. I really love that. Yeah.
Have you got any food on the balcony?
I have. I've just done my balcony. I left it again quite late this year because I'm London. I actually get away with doing the balcony a bit earlier. It's south facing, but this year we've had these cold nights, so I've held back. So I've got everything's seed this year. I've got a couple of roses on there, and I've got my world famous Nissia sylvatica, we all know and love, and so that's on there. But I everything's been in my front room. It's been driving Mrs. Collins nuts, I can tell you. So everything's been in my front room, but maybe 2/3 of it now is out, and the rest has gone down the allotment. So I've cleared it. And I plant everything. I've got all my bedding in there. So I've got some great bedding plants, pelargoniums. I've got petunias. So I've got all that colour coming. And then amongst that, I've got cucumber, trailing cucumber, small little trailing cucumber. I've got peppers, and I've got aubergine, and of course I've got Tommies. So it's all montaged together, and I expect big things from it this year. I pack it out. I plant quite densely because I want it to really fill. And I tell you what I've got at the moment that's been flowering, still flowering. It's coming to the end now. I put Dutch iris in.
Oh, yes.
And I put them in spikes, and I put them round the rows, and they've just been phenomenal. So you just get, what I'm trying to do is, as the seasons change, I plant this up. I want this colour to develop, but also the edibles in amongst it as well.
Yeah.
So I've got big hopes for it, especially if it's a warm summer and it's south facing. I'll just be out with a watering can quite a lot. That's the only thing.
Yeah. There was a concept that I was introduced to this year at the Chelsea Flower Show, which was called edimental.
Uh-huh.
So,
I heard this expression.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's ornamental plus you eat it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just a way of getting more food, isn't it, out of your garden?
If you look at a plant like a courgette or a runner bean, these are very beautiful
Stunning.
plants. So a runner bean on an arch is incredible.
Yes.
So again, we suffer from this. Everything's got to be binary in this place, in this country. You know, you've got long grass or short grass. But as in both work, and I think you certainly need to be more open-minded about it. I look at veg, sweet corn. I love that plant. Courgette, when you get this, just beautiful, especially the yellow one, it's a beautiful plant with beautiful fruits. So you have to look at them as ornamentals, and then you're having the benefit of being able to take them out and cook them.
Yeah, and then you get the benefit of all worlds, don't you, that way? I mean, this month we are just getting ready to go to Gardeners World Live. And we've got something called the Grow Your Own stage there. We've got a fantastic lineup of brilliant organic growers, including yourself, Chris. And we've got Jeckham at Vicar coming along to talk. We've got Recca Mystery coming along to talk. We've got August Beth from the Manoir. And our very own Anton will also be making an appearance, which is absolutely fantastic. So for anyone heading to the show, please make sure you check out our schedule and come and say hello. We're planning to record a live version of the podcast as well at the show on Friday. So do bring your questions along to ask us in person.
I'm really excited about this. I really am, mate. Organic growers together. What more could you ask for?
I know. It's fantastic, isn't it? Well, now I've got my weekend plans sorted, I'm keen to bring Anton into our chat now, Chris, to talk about herbicides. And not just herbicides, but actually glyphosate in particular, because we're running a campaign to raise awareness of the dangers of this particular herbicide ahead of a relicensing decision at the end of this year. So we're calling for a ban on this toxic chemical, which can be found in some garden products such as Weedol and Roundup. We particularly focused on banning it for the use in gardens, parks, schools, and other places where people are, public spaces. And our friends at the Soil Association and Riverford Organic are also calling for a ban on its use in farming. So welcome, Anton. Hi, good to see you. First of all, can you just tell us, actually, what is glyphosate?
So glyphosate is a herbicide. That means it kills off weeds. It's what's termed as a systemic herbicide, which means it's actually taken up by the plant. It doesn't just kill on contact. It's taken up by the whole plant and will go down to the roots and kill it. Just to give a little bit of history of glyphosate. So it was originally sort of tested as an antibiotic in the 1950s because they found that it killed off bacteria, but it was found not to be a particularly good one, so they put it back on the shelf. And then in the 1970s, Monsanto discovered that it was really good at killing weeds. So they patented it as a herbicide and gave it the name glyphosate or Roundup. Now, one of the things about glyphosate is it inhibits a thing called the shikimate pathway, which is a pathway that just plants and fungi and bacteria use to synthesize proteins, but it's not used in animals. So therefore people thought that it was really, really safe, that it wouldn't harm animals at all.
So it wouldn't harm livestock and it wouldn't harm humans, is what they thought.
Yeah, I remember when I went to agricultural college being told that this was one of the safest things. They said it was as safe as common table salt. I remember my lecturer saying that, and it's one of the most widely used herbicides today.
Originally, it was known to kill plants, and it was thought that it just killed plants. But actually, isn't there now a school of thought that actually proves that it's incredibly bad for humans because of what it does to plants?
So it was originally thought just because it attacks plants and bacteria, but not animals, it was safe for humans. But actually, when you think about it, we have got a massive load of bacteria in our gut, so it is bound to have a big effect on humans. It's also been shown to have lots of other sort of adverse effects, and particularly it's been shown to have what are called sort of mutagenic effects on DNA, which can cause cancers. So there's been some quite recent work. One of the most extensive global studies that was carried out by the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, and they basically showed what was considered to be an acceptable daily limit is basically far too high. Basically, if you take this daily acceptable limit, what's considered to be safe, this has been shown to cause multiple types of cancers. So this is really quite scary. There's also been a recent, what's called a meta-analysis, where they go and look at lots and lots of different papers, and they've shown that individuals who are regularly exposed to glyphosate have had a big increase in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as well. So that's a paper that was done in 2019.
I mean, it seems to me that it's fairly undisputed that it's really bad for human health. And that's really why we're looking at calling for a ban on the use of glyphosate in schools, in public parks, but also in gardens, and just kind of trying to draw people's attention to this because, well, first of all, you don't really need to use it, and there are other ways, which we'll get onto. But fundamentally, you're taking a risk by using it. You're actually taking a risk with your own personal health.
I think also with gardens, the one thing you can't police it, and I know, for example, that you'll get told a certain ratio to use it. The amount you should put in a litre of water, say. But I don't think people stick to that rule. They think, I'll chuck 3 times the amount and I'll get rid of these dandelions in my path. So I think it's probably been overused on that sort of level, which is even more reason to take it out of retail and take it out of back gardens and front gardens, I think.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. But people think they need it.
Yeah, well, they've been taught that. Actually, in the springtime, you see all the adverts of the cartoon dandelion and getting the weed oil on it, and it gets sprayed and it dies. So they say, well, spring's here, I need to do this job. And until we disrupt that messaging, there's a problem. And for instance, for me, obviously, in my younger years as an amenity horticulturist, I used a lot of chemical. It wasn't all the time, but we used to use it. And I remember distinctly thinking, and this influenced my decisions to become organic later, was when I used it, I'd have to put on a full body suit. I'd have put on goggles, a mask, a head cover before I put a knapsack on. And I remember thinking, well, this can't be good if I've got to put all this stuff on, surely, Well, there's obviously something wrong. Why am I spraying something on the ground that I have to protect myself from? I used to look after a palm house, a big tropical collection. This is a different chemical, but we used to use nicotine shreds. And so you'd put nicotine shreds down on the pathways in the palms, light them, and it would just gas everything. So cockroaches would fall out the plants and aphids. And I'd be walking around in it 10 minutes later. So we've come a long way from actually, that there it was just assumed that we could use this stuff and it was all like having salt on your dinner, and actually now we're starting to discover, against a massive, powerful lobby, by the way. I don't want to be too political, but there's that we're fighting against. But we know now that these issues need to be raised.
Definitely. Absolutely. So what is it really used for mainly, Anton?
So like I said, it's one of the most widely used agrochemicals globally. So it's used a lot in public places. It's used on our pavements, roads, gardens. It's also used heavily in agriculture as well. More recently, it's been used as a desiccant for cereals and potato crops. So basically, to make it easier to harvest these crops, they spray it on there to dry it out. This practice was actually banned in the EU, but the UK's carried on doing it, so that's not too great. And then in the US, basically, they've got genetically engineered crops, which they've actually put a gene in to make their crops resistant to glyphosate, so that you can spray the whole crop heavily with glyphosate and your crop will remain standing, but it will kill off all the weeds. And this has actually created big problems because it's actually the weeds have started to evolve resistance to glyphosate because they've been spraying it so heavily.
Yeah, so ultimately, it's not a long-term solution, is it?
No, I mean, this happens with all chemicals. Basically, the more you spray them, things develop resistance. It happens with all agrochemicals. So none of them are really that sustainable, but it keeps the agrochemical companies in business because they keep having to develop new products.
Yes, and people keep going back for more. I mean, you were saying, Chris, when you used it in the past, it didn't always work.
Well, I've certainly actually going back into retail, into domestic use of it. You can use it on a pathway. It will just come back. It will just come back. So you're having to use it over and over again, basically. But obviously that obviously brings in cash, doesn't it? But actually, as Anton points out, with all these chemicals, plants are quite adaptive. They will find ways around it. What I think the worry is, and maybe this is happening with that in agriculture, is you're using more of it to compensate for the fact that it's not doing the job you think it's going to do. And if it's happening in agriculture, it certainly is happening in domestic situations as well. It doesn't work. And like you say, there are alternative methods. Particularly in domestic gardening scenarios, definitely.
It's really, though, this message that it's completely safe has really landed. People aren't questioning it, actually. And this to discover, both of you, were in your training. You were trained. I
was at Kew Gardens. I was trained up. I've got a PA1.
How to use it?
Yeah, PA. Well, like it is part of the job. You had to do it.
You had to learn how to be able to spray things off and get rid, I suppose.
And the safety aspects on it as well, because it's like you can't have something lying around on shelves and stuff like that. As I was saying to Anton, when I went to Westminster Abbey, there was stuff in there that was 30, 40 years old in the cupboard, and it was all leaking. And you know what I mean? It was like brutal. This is all banned stuff. So what do you do with those chemicals when you're not using them? People buy them from a garden centre, whack them in the shed. For a few years later, I'll get fresh stuff, and it's actually starting to store and build up in domestic settings as well. So that's a lack of education. That's a lack of means of getting rid of it.
And so, in that context, then, if anybody listening, has sort of gone down to the shed and thought, actually, I've got a few things in the shed that it's time. I'm never going to use this stuff again. How do they get rid of it?
This is a really difficult one because it really varies according to where you are. You need to contact your council and find out where you can take it to the tip. Don't just sort of chuck it in your rubbish or something because it's going to leach out somewhere. So, I mean, I've had experience of a couple of councils, and our own council, basically, it's like the sort of third Thursday of the month for sort of 20 minutes. You have to go at the right time, otherwise you can't dispose of it. But then there's another council that I've dealt with that basically accepts these chemicals quite readily. Yes, it is quite tricky knowing how they're going to respond.
But it is doable. Ultimately, it is doable if you're persistent. Okay. Can we just go back to this desiccant discussion? Because I think that is something that people do not know at all, that the use of glyphosate right at the end, just before you harvest a crop, to kill it off in order to dry it out so that it's easier to handle. It's easier to reap the wheat and the oats that you need. And that means that those cereals are still full of glyphosate, are they? Or, I mean, it's terrifying to think that the bread that you're buying or the oats that you're buying for your porridge are covered in glyphosate.
So, yes, this practice came apart just partly because we live in quite a wet climate, so it dries it out and makes it much easier for people to harvest it. It also makes it more uniform as well, because things ripen at different times on a wheat plant. Some of it falls onto the floor, whereas the bit at the top still isn't ripe, so it just makes it all ripe at the same time, makes it easy. But basically, these residues have been found in a lot of bread and wheat products. I think there's a study that was done quite recently that found that there's about 50% of samples contain agrochemicals, including glyphosate. Some of the arguments are that, oh, well, it's at levels which are below the acceptable limits. But then this other study showed that actually these acceptable limits are far too high. So we don't really know, is the honest truth, what sort of harm this could be doing us, but we do know that we are taking it in.
It's because you don't get you don't get information, do you? If you buy, like I say, a packet of potatoes from the supermarket, it's not on there, is it? This has been treated. So this is like, you're not getting the full story, are you, straight away? So it's a little bit worrying, isn't it?
It's worth buying organic in as many contexts as possible, but perhaps particularly in the context of oats and flour, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, in our household, we've completely gone to using organic cereal products now, just for that reason.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, me too. Ignorance is bliss in some cases, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. So, okay, so that's the gloom and doom. Okay, it's everywhere. I think there is a greater awareness, I would think, amongst local authorities now than perhaps before. There's been an awful lot of campaigning around this for a number of years. Some have stopped using it, but the majority are still using it. So let's be practical for a minute. What are the alternatives? So, you're faced with managing a park or a series of pavements. People don't want weeds. So what can you do other than spray?
So it's interesting. Obviously, it's a well-worn story. I've talked about. I went organic at Westminster Abbey and the challenges I faced there. I should point out as well, although I did a PA1 at Kew, I very rarely, I think I sprayed once there in 3 years. They were really reducing it. So some of the techniques, the biggest one for me is making sure you fill your borders out, that you cover your soil, that you don't allow weeds to establish. I think that's probably the biggest one. In fact, when I garden privately, if I do gardening jobs, I tend to plant small, locally grown plants and quite dense. I want to cover the soil so you're not allowing the weed to come in. When it comes to pointing is a big thing, making sure you're not allowing gaps for plants to come in. And that's, in a way, that has to be done quite regularly. People point a patio and they leave it for 10 years. Obviously, the pointing degrades. When I say pointing, that would be a cement sand mixture. At the Abbey, it was lime. But you're sealing the surface so you're not allowing weeds to exploit it. We used a burner at the Abbey. That's what I used to do. And I found that quite effective, to be honest with you.
So effectively a flamethrower?
Yes, yeah. And that, when we just burn them off. And over time, it just stopped the problem completely, a combination of that and pointing. But as for planting borders, filling them up, definitely. Weeding before they set seeds, another big one, keeping on top of your weeding. So you can reduce the amount. No dig is a classic example. You're not bringing all that seed up to the surface. So there's ways you can get the plants you desire to outcompete the plants you don't want, the freer plants. Obviously, I'm talking on a domestic basis here, not an agricultural basis.
But then in a garden, so I can imagine if you're managing Westminster Abbey, I can imagine you've got your flamethrower. But actually, in a garden setting, have you ever used that method, Anton?
I haven't really used a sort of flame weeder, but I tend to just go for sort of mechanical measures. I would just go along with Chris, really just growing plants which are a lot more competitive, using mulches, and also just appreciating that there's some weeds that are actually...
on the allotment, I have to live with it. There's just no two ways about it. There's no way, unless I was there 4 hours every day when I eradicate that weed problem. So I cope with them. And I'm actually, in a way, it's been quite interesting because some areas get quite heavily weedy. They actually help out the strength of the soil. They actually contribute to soil health. So they're doing the job. I'd rather have the weeds there with their roots in the ground, improving the soil, than bare where it was bleaching and getting damaged. So in a way, you kind of realise they're doing the job, and it takes the pressure off you a bit. We live in a society where it's got to be so meticulous and controlled. And the idea, you see that in the supermarkets, the apples have all got to look the same on the shelf, and so we need in a little way to let go a bit, I think, don't we? That's probably a good way to look at it.
I mean, I tend to, in my own garden, we've got quite a bit of paving, and we just tend to, if I like the look of the weed, I let it grow, and the ones I don't, I pull out. So, and we've got all sorts of really nice things growing between the paving cracks now. We get poppies coming up, we've got scabious, we've got chives, all sorts of things which are attracting loads of bees.
It's in it, isn't it?
Yeah.
The weed's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no. I don't even like the word weed because it's like you either want it to grow there or you don't. It's a choice, isn't it? And so I think, and you're right. Those plants all self-seed, and so they will establish themselves, and then that's what you have down the Gertrude Jekyll road. There aren't all plants are welcome, and if they set seed, let all plants be free. I think it's quite a nice way to look at it.
If you're managing a more public garden or perhaps a community garden, what kind of methods can you adopt in that context? I mean, there must be other things maybe on the market. I mean, I gather there's something you can do with foam.
There's a really nice example with Lambeth Council that they basically they put out information about all the various weeds which were likely to come to all the residents so that people would view them positively. And they also had community weeding sessions as well, which brought people together, and people said they really enjoyed it, as well as they did keep the pavements clear as well. But it's just educating people.
It is a messaging thing, isn't it?
People just look at some plants going, oh, my council isn't bothering to weed anymore and stuff. There's turning it into a slightly more positive thing.
I mean, fundamentally, there's a big piece of messaging here that we just keep needing to hammer on home. And that is that weeds are beneficial. But it's hard to get that across, I think, if you're a local authority, and because people have expectations. And, some of that goes back to the days of municipal gardens that were totally manicured, and people sort of hark back to that. It's kind of not the way we're doing things anymore.
I mean, the pointlessness of some of it, like spraying around the base of trees.
Yeah.
Like outside my block, I've got my verge, I do a lot on social media about it. It's looking fantastic. It's built up, but next to it, there's a bit of grass, and they just sprayed that. It's like on a bank, and you think, well, for what possible reason?
I've been told.
yeah. And obviously, maybe they go, well, we'll spray it. We'd have to cut it, so therefore we've made a saving. So it's just a really interesting. I'd mention this because I just find that this bit of it really interesting. That they use economics as a justification for it.
Yeah. It's cheaper to spray than to get people hand weeding. That's what people always say, isn't it? Budgets are always cited as a reason for things to be done or not to be done, and cost might be a barrier for local authorities in terms of stopping spraying. What do you say to that, Anton?
So, obviously councils often say that glyphosate is the cheapest way of keeping the weeds down or keeping pavements safe and things like that. There have been some costs that were looked at with Glastonbury Council, and they looked at the cost per metre of various sort of weed treatments. Obviously, hand weeding is just very expensive, when you've got to employ someone to pull out the weeds. It isn't really feasible on a big scale in lots of situations. But actually, these foam weeders, these are things which pump out really sort of hot water mixed with biodegradable sort of oils. They are actually very cost-effective way of controlling the weeds. You do have an upfront cost to those machines. They tend to be between sort of £10,000 or £20,000 up front. But once you've got that machine, which you could lease out as well, the actual cost of using it actually compares quite favourably to using a sort of chemical spray.
And that foam, which, I can feel myself sort of slightly worrying about foam in the context of organic methods. You said it contains oils. How does that work?
So they're plant-based oils which just break down naturally. They're fine. They have tested that.
I think like all of these things, we've got used to using it. We think we need to use it. We think that alternatives are all a bit too difficult. Perhaps it's going to cost more. We're going to have to retrain people. Let's just carry on using it. It's not that bad. That seems to be kind of where we're at the moment. Do you think a ban will actually happen, Anton?
I think it's quite difficult to say. Although within the EU, the chemical has been reapproved, places like France, for example, have banned amateur gardeners from using it. Wow. Basically, you can only use glyphosate if you're a professional gardener. So I certainly hope that the legislation will become a lot stricter on it, even if a ban doesn't go through.
We need to get it out of retail, definitely, and that's a possibility, I think. And that's still a journey on it. Agriculturally, probably a bit more tricky, but that's and certainly retail. I'd love to see a ban as soon as possible.
I mean, what is quite interesting to look at when you look at the products available on the counter, that quite a few of the herbicides advertise themselves as being glyphosate free. So it's perhaps they're thinking that the ban is a possibility.
But even glyphosate-free doesn't mean it's a product you should necessarily use, presumably.
No, so some of the alternatives, quite often they use acetic acid, which is pretty similar to vinegar, or pelargonic acid, which is a naturally occurring chemical. They're both quite corrosive things, not that nice to use. They do break down in the soil a lot more quickly than glyphosate, but some of the arguments are that you have to use more of them because they're not quite as effective as glyphosate. So yeah, they're not simple we don't really want to see sort of chemicals replacing them like for like.
And then I suppose if we did get a ban, wouldn't somebody just come up with something that was potentially even worse?
So I think that's a really interesting one, because generally the chemical arsenal available for both amenity horticulture and in agriculture is shrinking rapidly. And people are looking at alternative biological controls such as parasitic wasps or nematodes are used virtually all the time just because they are more effective and cheaper to use than chemicals. Also, the organic sector for about the last 20 years has come up with really innovative ways of weeding. They've got all sorts of mechanical things like brush weeders. They've got finger weeders which have got little rubber fingers on that rotate around. They've even got robot weeders with cameras on that can see where the plants are and recognize the difference between a plant and a weed. And those have been adapted sort of outside the organic sector as well now. So yeah, I think it's just being a bit more sort of creative and more imaginative in the way that you deal with things rather than just blasting them with chemicals.
Well, thank you very much, Anton, for all that information. And it's been really interesting, hasn't it, Chris?
It's fascinating.
But if this conversation has motivated you to support our campaign, then do visit our website, gardenorganic.org.uk, and follow the link on the homepage to sign the petition. We really want to reach at least 10,000 signatures. The website also has a template letter to send on to your MP, so do fill those out too. I mean, even if a ban doesn't happen, do stop buying it, and also use consumer power. Make a noise. You know, it's really, really important at this point to show that lots of people care about this. We're also sharing posts on our social media channels at Garden Organic UK, so do please reshare to help us reach many more people. Well, that's all we've got time for. Many thanks to my colleagues Chris and Anton, and to Kevin MacLeod for the music. Look out for our interview with Dave Goulson in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, please visit our website, gardenorganic.org.uk, and support our campaign to ban glyphosate. If the issue of pesticide use matters to you, now's the time to make sure your voice is heard.